Welcome. This is the complete story of Moses. A story that spans 80 years of extraordinary life, from the palace to the desert, from royalty to solitude, from murder to leadership, from the burning bush to the Red Sea, from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land. This is not just a biblical story, it is the story of how an ordinary man became the deliverer of a nation, of how God transforms failure into purpose, of how the most difficult journey begins with a step of obedience. So relax, and let this ancient story carry you through time. Back to ancient Egypt, where it all began. It was the year 1526 before Christ. Egypt was at the height of its power. Pyramids had already dominated the horizon for 1,000 years. The Nile nourished the most advanced civilization in the world, and Pharaoh ruled as a living god. But there was a shadow over Egypt, a population of foreign slaves that was growing rapidly. The Hebrews, descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the very people whom Joseph, centuries earlier, had brought to Egypt during a great famine. The book of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 7, describes, "The children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied, and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. And this terrified Pharaoh, because a numerous people is a powerful people, a people who could rebel, a people who could ally themselves with Egypt's enemies, a people who needed to be controlled. So Pharaoh made a brutal decision." Verse 11, "Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens." The Hebrews were forced into slavery. They worked from sunrise to sunset. They made bricks. They built cities. They carried stones. Their backs broke under the weight. Their hands bled. Their bodies withered. And yet, they continued to multiply. The more they were oppressed, the more they increased. It was as if an invisible force protected them, as if a greater purpose sustained them. Pharaoh realized that slavery was not enough. He needed something more drastic, something final. Verse 16, "When you help the Hebrew women in childbirth, and see them upon the stools, if it is a son, you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live." Genocide. The order was clear. Every Hebrew boy was to die at birth. But the midwives feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. And secretly, they let the boys live. So Pharaoh escalated even further. Verse 22, "Then Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive." The Nile River, the source of Egypt's life, would become the grave of innocent children. Soldiers patrolled the Hebrew villages. They tore babies from the arms of weeping mothers and threw them into crocodile-infested waters. It is in this context of terror that Moses is born. Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. "And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived, and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. His father's name was Amram. His mother's name was Jochebed. They already had 2 children, Aaron and Miriam. And now another son, a boy, and the death sentence was automatic. But Jochebed looked at that baby and saw something. The Bible says she saw that he was beautiful. The Hebrew word means more than physically beautiful. It means there was something special, something divine, a mark of God's purpose. And she decided, "I will not hand my son over to death." So she hid him. For 3 months, she kept the baby silent. She muffled his cries. She hid his existence. She lived in constant fear of being discovered. But babies grow, and cries grow louder, and eventually, hiding would no longer be possible. Verse 3, "And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink." An ark, the same word used for Noah's ark, a vessel of salvation. Jochebed made a waterproof basket, placed her son inside, and set it among the reeds of the Nile. The same river that was a grave for other Hebrew babies would, she hoped, become the path of salvation for hers. It was a desperate gamble. Faith without guarantees, a whispered prayer as she released the basket and walked away. Heartbroken, verse 4. And his sister stood afar off, to know what would be done to him. Miriam, the older sister, stood watching, hidden among the reeds, waiting, praying, trembling. And then something extraordinary happened. Verse 5. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. Verse 6. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and, behold, the baby wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. She knew exactly what that baby represented. She knew her father's order. She knew that by saving that child, she would be defying Pharaoh. But something in that cry touched her heart. Something in those eyes disarmed her, and compassion overcame fear. In that moment, Miriam stepped out of hiding. With the courage that only a child can have, she approached the princess. Verses 7 and 8. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to you a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Miriam's strategy was brilliant, and it worked. The princess needed someone to nurse and care for the baby, and Miriam offered exactly that without revealing it was the true mother. Verse 9. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. Jochebed not only got her son back, she was paid to raise him. Egypt, which wanted to kill the Hebrews, was financing the upbringing of Israel's future deliverer. The irony was poetic. The divine providence, undeniable. And when the child was weaned, probably at 3 or 4 years old, he was brought to the palace. Verse 10. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, Because I drew him out of the water. Moses. In Hebrew, Moshe. It means drawn out of the water. But in Egyptian, it sounds like son of. He became the son of the princess, a prince of Egypt, heir to an empire. The baby who should have died in the Nile was being raised in the palace of the man who ordered his death. The slave child was educated as royalty. The Hebrew was learning the secrets of Egyptian power. Acts chapter 7, verse 22 tells us, And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds. He learned hieroglyphics, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, military strategy, philosophy. He had access to the finest libraries in the world, the best teachers, the secrets that kept Egypt a superpower. He lived in luxury, ate the finest foods, wore the finest clothes, was served by slaves, walked through marble halls, saw the Nile from golden balconies. But he knew who he was. His biological mother had those crucial early years to plant seeds of identity, to whisper stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to speak of the God of his ancestors, to remind him that he was Hebrew, not Egyptian. And that tension of identity grew with him. A prince by upbringing, a slave by birth, Egyptian by education, Hebrew by blood, living between two worlds, belonging completely to neither. And that tension would eventually explode in a way that would change everything. 40 years passed. Moses was now 40 years old. It came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel. 40 years of luxury, 40 years of power, 40 years watching his people suffer while he lived as a prince, and something inside him could no longer bear it. He decided to visit his brothers, not as a prince inspecting slaves, but as one of them, as someone who finally wanted to understand who he truly was. Exodus chapter 2, verse 11. Moses went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens. He spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. He saw what had always been there, but what he had chosen not to fully see. The brutality, the whip, the blood, the crying, injustice, in its rawest form. An Egyptian taskmaster was beating a Hebrew slave, striking without mercy. And something broke inside Moses. Verse 12, he looked this way and that way. And when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. It was a moment of righteous anger turned into murder. He looked around, made sure he was alone, and killed the Egyptian, buried the body, and returned to the palace as if nothing had happened. But murder has consequences, and secrets in the desert do not stay buried forever. Verse 13. The second day, Moses saw the Hebrews strove together. He said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smittest thou thy fellow? The next day, Moses saw two Hebrews fighting. He tried to intervene, tried to be a peacemaker, tried to exercise authority, but the answer he received shattered him. Verse 14. Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me, as thou killest the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. Who appointed you leader? Who said you have authority over us? Are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? The words cut deep, because they revealed three devastating truths. First, his crime was not secret. Someone had seen, and now everyone knew. Second, the Hebrews did not see him as a savior. They saw him as an impostor, as an Egyptian pretending to be Hebrew, as a prince playing liberator. Third, his attempt at justice had only created more trouble. He had not helped. He had complicated everything, and worse was yet to come. Verse 15. Now, when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. Pharaoh found out the man who had raised him as a son now wanted his head, because Moses had killed an Egyptian, because he had chosen a side, because he was a traitor. And Moses fled. He left the palace, left the luxury, left his position, left his identity, left everything. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 24 through 26, explains his choice. By faith, Moses, when he was come 2 years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. He chose consciously to suffer with his people instead of enjoying the pleasures of sin. He saw beyond the moment, beyond immediate comfort, and chose purpose over pleasure. But now he was running through the desert, alone, without enough water, without food, without clear direction, just running from soldiers, running from Pharaoh, running from his past. And he arrived in Midian, a desert land east of Egypt, land of nomadic shepherds, land where no one knew him, land where he could disappear. Verse 15 continues, and he dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. A well in the desert. Wells are meeting places, oases of life, where shepherds bring flocks to drink, where travelers rest, where stories are shared. And Moses, exhausted, a fugitive, without purpose, sat down and waited, not knowing that that well would change everything. Verse 16, now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. 7 daughters of a priest, shepherds, working in male territory. And immediately trouble arose. Verse 17, and the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them, and watered their flock. Other shepherds, rough men, tried to drive the women away from the well, to take their place, to humiliate them. And something in Moses awakened, the same sense of justice that had led him to kill the Egyptian. But now, with restraint, he stood up, confronted the shepherds, defended the women, and helped them water their flocks. It was a small act, a gesture of kindness, but it was noticed. Verses 18 and 19. And when they came to rule their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? Unto sight an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock. An Egyptian! They thought he was Egyptian because of his appearance, his clothing, his posture, his manner. 40 years in the palace had left their mark, and now, ironically, he was seen as Egyptian by Hebrews and as Hebrew by Egyptians. Homeless everywhere. Their father was Reuel, also called Jethro, priest of Midian, a wise man, a man of God. Verse 20, And he said unto his daughters, And where is he? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. Hospitality in the desert is sacred, and Jethro would not allow a man who helped his daughters to go hungry. Verse 21, And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, Moses Tajet, not because he had plans, but because he had nowhere else to go, no purpose, no identity. He was a broken man. And Jethro welcomed him. Eventually, Moses married Zipporah, one of Jethro's daughters, and he became a shepherd of sheep. He who had been prince of Egypt, educated in the mysteries of the most advanced civilization, trained in military strategy, now tended sheep in the desert. It was a humiliating fall. It was a waste of potential. It was exactly where God wanted him. Verse 22, And she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. Gershom, a stranger there. The name was a confession, a pain. Moses did not belong to Egypt, did not belong to Midian, did not belong anywhere. He was an eternal foreigner, forever displaced. And so 40 years passed, 40 years tending sheep, 40 years in the desert, 40 years of silence, 40 years where nothing seemed to happen, 40 years that felt wasted. Moses was now 80 years old, half of his life in the palace, half in the desert, and it seemed as though his story was already over, that his attempt to be a deliverer had been nothing more than youthful arrogance, that he was destined to die, an anonymous shepherd in a foreign land. But God was only beginning. Because sometimes God has to break you before he can use you. He has to empty you before he can fill you. He has to isolate you before he can send you. And 40 years in the desert were God's process of transforming an arrogant prince into a humble leader. Moses was about to discover that his life had not been a waste. It had been preparation, and everything he had, lived palace and desert, power and impotence, identity and loss, was shaping him for the greatest calling in the history of Israel. A calling that would come in a way no one could imagine, from a bush that burned without being consumed. In the same desert where he tended sheep, on the mountain of God, Horeb, and nothing would ever be the same again. Exodus chapter 3 begins with deceptive simplicity. Verse 1, Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. He led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. It was an ordinary day, just another day in a 40-year routine. Nothing suggested it would be the most important day of Moses' life. But God often appears in ordinary days, in moments when you are not expecting it. Moses was about to learn that. Verse 2, The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed, a common desert shrub on fire. But there was something different. The bush burned, but was not consumed. It was physically impossible. It was a miracle. Verse 3, Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. Curiosity moved him. He was not seeking God, not praying. He was simply curious about a strange phenomenon. God was waiting for exactly that. Verse 4, When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. God called him by name. Twice. Urgency. Intimacy. Moses' response was immediate. Verse 5, And he said, Draw not nigh hither. Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Take off your shoes, a strange command, yet full of meaning. Removing shoes means stopping, recognizing you are in a sacred moment. In the presence of the divine, that your agenda does not matter, that you must simply be. The ground was holy because God was there. Moses obeyed. He removed his sandals and waited trembling. Verse 6, Moreover he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. God identified himself, not as some Egyptian god, but as the God of his ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses hid his face, because holy fear overwhelmed him, because you do not look upon God and remain unchanged, because he stood before absolute holiness, incomprehensible power, unimaginable majestia. Then God spoke, and his words carried such weight that they shaped the course of human history. Verses 7 and 8. The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land, unto a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. God saw, God heard, God knew. Verbs of intimacy, of involvement, of care. The transcendent God was also immanent. He was not distant, he was attentive to suffering, and he decided to act. Notice, I am come down to deliver. God himself was involved. Not merely sending angels, not delegating. He was personally stepping into history, the Creator intervening directly. But then came the part Moses did not expect. Verse 10. Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people the children of Israel out of Egypt. Wait? What? God would deliver Israel, but he would use Moses. You go, I will send you. The man who fled Egypt, who failed in his first attempt at liberation, who killed and ran, who spent 40 years as an anonymous shepherd. That man, Moses' reaction was completely human. Verse 11. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I? 40 years earlier, Moses knew who he was. Prince, educated, powerful, capable. He tried to deliver by his own strength, unfailed. Now, 40 years later, broken, humble, emptied of arrogance, he finally understood. I am nobody. I have nothing. I can do nothing. And ironically, that was exactly the condition God needed, because God does not use these. He uses those who know they are weak and depend on him. Verse 12. And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. God's answer was not, You are strong enough. It was, I will be with you. God's presence was the guarantee. Not Moses' ability, but divine presence. And the sign, not a prior confirmation, but a future one. Obedience came before confirmation. Faith before proof. But Moses was not convinced. He had questions, objections, fears. Verse 13. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? What is your name? Not a question of identification, a question of nature, of character. And God's answer was one of the most profound declarations in all of Scripture. Verse 14. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say to the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. I am, in Hebrew, Yahweh, the unpronounceable name. The name that means pure existence, absolute being. eternity without beginning, presence without end. I am that I am. Not I was or I will be, but eternal present, always existing, always present, always faithful, the God who does not change. And this God I am was sent in Moses, not a lesser God, but the absolute God, the Creator, the Eternal One. But Moses continued to resist. Chapter 4, verse 1. And Moses answered and said, But, behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And to prove his point, God gave signs. He turned a staff into a serpent. He made a healthy hand leprous, and then restored it. He promised to turn water into blood, signs that would prove divine authority. Still, Moses had more objections. Verse 10. And Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant. But I am slow of speech, and of a slow tongue. I cannot speak well. I have a speech impediment. I am inadequate. 40 years in the desert had perhaps erased the eloquence of the palace. God's response was direct. Verses 11 and 12. And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth, or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. Who made your mouth? I did. And if I made it, I can use it. Your limitation is not a problem for me. Your weakness does not restrict me. Go. But Moses, desperate, made one last plea. Verse 13. And he said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. Send someone else. Anyone else, just not me. Please, I am not ready. I am not capable. I do not want this. And for the first time, we see the anger of God in the dialogue. Verse 14. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. God partially conceded. Aaron would be the spokesman, but it was not ideal. It was not the original plan, and that concession would create future complications. Because when you resist God's call, when you insist on human crutches, you dilute divine power. But God, patient, accepted it. And Moses, finally, reluctantly, obeyed. He returned to Jethro, asked permission to go back to Egypt, took his wife and sons, took the staff God had turned into a serpent, and began the journey, a journey that would lead him back to the place he had fled, back to the Pharaoh who wanted to kill him, back to the people who had rejected him, back to the place of his greatest failure. But now he did not go as an arrogant prince. He went as a humble servant, not trusting in himself, but in I am. And Egypt was about to learn that when God sends, nothing can resist. When I am act, empires tremble. And the unlikely deliverer was about to become the most powerful prophet in the history of Israel. The journey back to Egypt was long. And during that journey, something strange happened. Book of Exodus 4, verses 24-26, records a disturbing event. God almost killed Moses because he had not circumcised his son. It was a harsh reminder. God does not tolerate partial obedience. He does not accept compromise. If Moses was going to be the leader of Israel, he first needed to obey the fundamental laws of the covenant, including circumcision. Zipporah, his wife, quickly circumcised their son, and God led him alone. But the message was clear. Holiness is not negotiable. Obedience is not optional. And Moses continued. He met Aaron on the way. He told him everything God had said. He showed him the signs, and together they went to the elders of Israel. Exodus 4, 29-31. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel. And Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and had looked upon their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshipped. The people believed, after 400 years of slavery, after generations of divine silence. Finally, God had visited them. Finally, there was hope. But now came the hard part, the confrontation with Pharaoh. Exodus 5:1. Afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." Let my people go. 5 words that would echo through the centuries. 5 words that would become a cry of freedom for all the oppressed. 5 words that would challenge the most powerful empire in the world. But Pharaoh's response was exactly what you would expect from a tyrant. Verse 2, "And Pharaoh said, Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go." Who is the Lord? Pharaoh saw himself as a god. Egypt had hundreds of gods. Why would he obey one more? And worse, why would he free his unpaid labor force? And to punish the audacity of Moses and Aaron, he did something brutal. Verses 6, 2-9. Pharaoh ordered that no more straw be given to the Hebrews to make bricks, yet demanded the same quota. Let heavier work be laid upon the men, that they may labor in it, and let them not regard false words. The slavery grew worse, the work became impossible, and the Hebrew people were furious. Verses 20-21. Meeting Moses and Aaron the Hebrew foreman said, "Let the Lord look upon you and judge, because you have made us abhorrent in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to kill us. You made everything worse. It was better before. Why did you come? Leave us alone." And Moses, devastated, cried out to God. Verses 22-23. So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Why is it you have sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people. Neither have you delivered your people at all. Why? You sent me, and everything got worse. Where is the deliverance? Where is the power you promised?" And God's answer was firm. Exodus chapter 6, verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he will let them go, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land. Now you will see. Be patient. Trust the process. Because what is about to happen will be so powerful that Pharaoh will not merely let Israel go. He will drive Israel out. He will beg them to leave." And then the plagues began. They were not merely natural disasters. They were targeted judgments. Each plague struck an Egyptian god, proving that Yahweh was supreme, proving that I am reigned over everything. First plague, water turned to blood. It struck Api, god of the Nile. The river that was the source of life became a source of death. Second plague, frogs. It struck Hecate, the frog-headed goddess. The frogs, once sacred, became a curse. Third plague, lice. It struck Set, god of the desert. Even the magicians could not replicate it. Fourth plague, flies. A clear separation. Flies throughout all Egypt, except in Goshen, where the Hebrews lived. Fifth plague, livestock disease. It struck Apis, the sacred bull. All the Egyptian cattle died. Not one Hebrew animal perished. Sixth plague, boils. It struck Sekhmet, goddess of healing. Even the priests could not stand before Pharaoh. Seventh plague, hail. It struck Nut, goddess of the sky. Fire mingled with hail destroyed the crops. Eighth plague, locusts. It struck Osiris, god of the harvest. What the hail left, the locusts devoured. Ninth plague, darkness. It struck Ra, the sun god. 3 days of total darkness, so thick it could be felt. But in Goshen there was light, and after each plague, the same pattern. Pharaoh hardened his heart, or God hardened Pharaoh's heart, depending on the verse. Because it was both, Pharaoh chose to resist, and God allowed that resistance to fully manifest. So there would be no doubt. So the whole world would see, you do not trifle with Yahweh. But there was one final plague. The worst of all, the one that would finally break Pharaoh's stubbornness. Exodus 11:4-5. And Moses said, "Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of the animals, every firstborn, from palace to prison, from prince to slave, from cattle to birds, universal death, universal mourning, final judgment." And for Israel to be spared, God instituted the Passover. Exodus 12. Each family was to take a lamb without blemish. Kill the lamb at twilight. Put the blood on the doorposts and lintel, and eat the roasted lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Dressed for travel, ready to leave. And at midnight, the angel of death passed through Egypt. Verses 29-30. And it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. So Pharaoh rose in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. There was not a house without death. The scream that echoed that night was deafening. Mothers holding dead sons, fathers weeping over firstborn children. Pharaoh discovering that his heir, his eldest son, was cold and lifeless. And finally, he broke. Verses 31-32. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said, "Rise, go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord, as you have said. Also, take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. Go, leave, take everything, just go, and bless me." The man who said, "Who is the Lord?" was now begging for a blessing. The tyrant who saw himself as a god now recognized he was dust, and the Egyptians, terrified, practically threw their riches at the Hebrews. Verses 35-36. And the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. 400 years of unpaid slave labor were compensated in a single night. Israel left wealthy, left with the spoils of Egypt, left as victors. Verse 37. Then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children, 600,000 men, plus women and children. Approximately 2 million people, an entire nation on the move. And Moses, the man who had reluctantly obeyed the call, was leading them. The shepherd of sheep now shepherded a people. The fugitive returned as liberator. The stutterer had become the voice of God. But the journey was only beginning, because leaving Egypt was one thing. Crossing the wilderness was another, and Pharaoh, even broken, still had one final move, a move that would lead to the most spectacular moment in the entire Exodus story. A moment when physics would be shattered, when the sea would split, when the impossible would become a pathway. The Red Sea was waiting for them, and with it, the miracle that would define Israel's identity forever. Exodus chapter 13, verses 17-18. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, "Lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war, and return to Egypt." But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. God did not lead them by the shortest path, because the shortest path meant war, and Israel, newly freed, enslaved 4 generations, was not ready for battle. So God guided them, taking the longest route, through the desert, toward the Red Sea, and God guided them in a visible way. Verses 21-22. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. He never took the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Literal presence, visible, constant. God did not send them off and disappear. He went with them, guiding every step. But as Israel marched toward freedom, something was changing in Pharaoh's heart. Exodus chapter 14, verse 5. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people. And they sighed, "Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" Regret. The mourning had passed, the pain had lessened, and greed returned. Why did we let our workforce go? Are we crazy? Verses 6 and 7. So he made ready his chariot, and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, and captains over all of them. 600 chosen chariots, the military elite of Egypt. Each chariot pulled by trained horses, each chariot carrying a fully equipped warrior, the most advanced war machine of the ancient world. And they set out in pursuit. Verse 9. And the Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamped by the sea. Israel was encamped near the Red Sea, resting, celebrating freedom. And suddenly, a cloud of dust on the horizon, the sound of approaching thunder. Not thunder, horses, hundreds of them, war, chariots. Egypt was coming. Verse 10. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. So the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Panic, absolute terror, because they were cornered. An army behind them, the sea in front of them, mountains on the sides. There was no escape. It was the perfect trap, and their reaction was human. Very human. Verses 11 and 12. And they said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in this wilderness? Why have you done this to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the very word we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, 'Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness'?" Sarcasm, anger, accusation. Were there no tombs in Egypt? Did you bring us all the way out here just to die? It was better in Egypt. 3 days ago they were singing of deliverance. Now they already wanted to go back. Because fear erases memory. A crisis reveals what is truly in the heart. And their hearts were full of unbelief. But Moses, who 40 years earlier would have panicked too, was different now. 40 years in the desert, an encounter with God, witnessing 9 plagues. That changes a man. Verses 13 and 14. And Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Do not fear. Be still. Watch God act. You do not need to fight. Just observe, because the Lord will fight for you." Absolute faith, total trust. Moses did not see the army. He saw God. He did not see the trap. He saw an opportunity for a miracle. But then God spoke, and there was urgency in his voice. Verse 15. And the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to march." Why are you praying? It is time to act. Tell the people, march forward, toward the sea. Yes, toward the impossible. Verse 16. But lift up your rod, and stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. Lift the rod, stretch out your hand, divide the sea. As if it were simple, as if physics were optional, as if the ocean obeyed human commands. But it was not a human command. It was a divine command through a human. And when God commands, nature obeys. But before the visible miracle, there was a miracle of protection. Verses 19 and 20. And the angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. The same phenomenon, opposite effects, because the presence of God saves those who trust and judges those who resist. And then the impossible happened. Verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. Moses stretched out his hand, and God sent a wind, not a normal wind, a supernatural wind, a wind that blew all night, a wind that pushed back billions of gallons of water, a wind that created a dry corridor in the middle of the ocean. The waters were divided, literally split apart, a wall of water on one side, a wall of water on the other, and in the middle, dry ground. Verse 22. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Tamar Ched, 2 million people. Through the sea, on dry ground, with walls of water on the sides, fish swimming in the walls. Seaweed visible, the depth of the ocean exposed. It was impossible. It was unexplainable. It was God. And on the other side, when the last Hebrew crossed, they looked back, and they saw the Egyptians entering as well. Verses 23 through 25. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Now it came to pass, in the morning watch, that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians, and he took off their chariot wheels, so that they drove them with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. The Egyptians, overcome by greed and arrogance, entered the sea. They thought, If slaves can do it, so can we. But God troubled their camp. He took the wheels off their chariots. He caused confusion. And they realized too late it was a trap. The Lord was fighting against them. And when they tried to retreat, it was too late. Verses 26 and 27. Then the Lord said to Moses, Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, on their chariots, and on their horsemen. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth, while the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Moses stretched out his hand again, and the waters returned. Billions of gallons crashing down, walls of water collapsing, the ocean reclaiming its place, and the entire army was swallowed up. 600 chariots, hundreds of horsemen, thousands of soldiers, all drowned. In seconds, verse 28, then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. Not so much as one of them remained. Not one survived. The most powerful war machine in the world, obliterated. In an instant, by God. Verses 30 and 31. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord, and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Israel was free, completely, definitively. And they saw the bodies on the beach. Physical proof, visual testimony. It was not imagination. It was not a legend. It happened, and they feared God, and believed. Finally, after seeing with their own eyes what God was capable of, and Moses led Israel in a song. Exodus chapter 15, the Song of Moses. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. It was a celebration. It was worship. It was an acknowledgement that they did not save themselves. God saved them. And this would be the story they would tell for generations. the story that would define who they were, the people God freed from Egypt. The people who crossed the sea, the people who saw an impossible miracle, and Moses, the reluctant deliverer, was now a national hero, the man through whom God worked the impossible. The prophet who divided the sea, but the journey was far from over. Because leaving Egypt was one thing, reaching the promised land was another, and the desert awaited them with 40 years of trials. 40 years of testing. 40 years where Moses would learn that freeing a people from physical slavery is easy. The hard part is freeing them from mental slavery, and that lesson would begin soon. Very soon. 3 days. Just 3 days after the most spectacular miracle they had ever witnessed, Israel was complaining again. Exodus 15, verses 22 through 24. Moses led Israel from the Red Sea into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Then they came to Marah, but the waters were bitter. Therefore its name was called Marah. And the people complained against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" Marah. It means bitter. And the waters were exactly that, undrinkable. The people, thirsty and desperate, turned against Moses again. 3 days, that's how long their faith lasted after seeing the sea split open. 3 days to completely forget the power of God. 3 days to return to fear, distrust, and complaining. Verse 25, so he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. When he cast it into the waters were made sweet. God showed him a tree. Moses threw it into the water, and the bitter water became sweet. A simple miracle, an immediate solution, but also a profound lesson, because God was teaching something. Verse 26, if you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you, which I have brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. I am the Lord who heals you, Yahweh Rapha. The healing God, if you trust, if you obey, I will take care of you. There is no need to panic, no need to complain. Just trust. And they went on to Elim. Verse 27, then they came to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees. So they camped there by the waters. An oasis, abundant water, shade, rest. After the test at Marah, God led them to a place of refreshment, because God does not test beyond what we can bear. He balances trial with provision, desert with oasis. But the desert continued, and with it, new trials. Exodus 16, verses 2 through 3. Then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the children of Israel said to them, "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness, to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Complaining. Again. Now it was hunger. And look at the selective memory. When we ate to the full in Egypt, had they completely forgotten they were slaves, that they were beaten, that their sons were thrown into the Nile? Now Egypt was a pleasant memory. That is human nature. When we are uncomfortable, we romanticize the past. We forget the pain. We remember only what was familiar, even if what was familiar was slavery, and the accusation was absurd. You brought us here to starve us, as if the God who divided the sea could not provide food. But God, patient, responded. Verse 4, then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. Bread from heaven. Manna, literally. What is it? Because when it appeared, no one knew what it was. Verses 13 through 15. So it was that quail came up at evening and covered the camp. And in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there, on the surface of the wilderness, was a small round substance, as fine as frost on the ground. So when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. In the morning, something white covering the ground. small, round, sweet like honey, and edible. And in the evening, flocks of quail falling from the sky, meat at night, bread in the morning, supernatural provision. Daily, constant. But there were rules. Verses 16 through 20. Gather only the daily portion. Do not store it up, because the next day there would be more. But some, not trusting, kept some back. And the next day it was rotten, full of worms. Trust. It was a test of trust. Do you trust that I will provide tomorrow, or do you need to secure it yourself? And there was an exception. On the sixth day, collect a double portion, because on the Sabbath there would be none. It was a day of rest, and miraculously, what was kept for the Sabbath did not spoil. Verse 35. And the children of Israel ate manna 40 years, until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. 40 years, every day, bread from heaven. 2 million people fed supernaturally. 4 decades. That is not coincidence. Not a natural phenomenon. It is divine sustenance. Jesus, centuries later, referred to this. John 6, verse 35. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger. Manna was pointing to something greater, to someone greater, to the true bread who would come down from heaven and give life to the world. But in the desert, the testing continued. Exodus 17, verse 1. Then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped in Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. No water, again, and again, complaining. Verses 2 through 3. Therefore the people contended with Moses, and said, Give us water, that we may drink. So Moses said to them, Why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted there for water. And the people complained against Moses, and said, Why is it you have brought us up out of Egypt, to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? Strife, accusation, testing the Lord. They were not just complaining about thirst. They were questioning whether God was really among them. Is the Lord among us, or not? And Moses, exasperated, cried out. Verse 4. So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me. What do I do? They are going to kill me. And God responded with grace. Again, verses 5 through 6. And the Lord said to Moses, Go on before the people, and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand your rod with which you struck the river, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. Strike the rock. And Moses did, and water gushed out, enough water for 2 million people and their herds, from a rock in the desert. Paul, centuries later, would explain 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. The rock was Christ, struck to give life, to quench thirst, pointing to the cross, where Christ would be struck, so that life could flow to all. But there, in the desert, it was immediate provision. Practical, real. God meeting their need once again, proving that he was among them. And soon after, the first battle. Verse 8. Now Amalek came and fought with Israel. Amalek, descendants of Esau, ancient enemies, and they attacked the weakest of Israel, cowards striking the rear guard. Verses 9 through 11. And Moses said to Joshua, Choose some men and fight. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. Prayer and action, faith and war, spiritual and physical, both necessary. Joshua fought, Moses prayed, and victory came from the combination. But Moses grew tired. Verse 12. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Aaron and Hur held up Moses' arms. When he weakened, they sustained him, because leadership is not solo. Intercession is not isolated. You need people beside you, holding you up when you are tired. And Amalek was defeated completely. But God made a solemn declaration. Verse 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this for a memorial in the book, and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven." Amalek would be destroyed, because they attacked Israel when it was vulnerable. And God does not forget. He is not unjust. Betrayal and cruelty against the weak carry eternal consequences. Centuries later, Saul would lose the kingdom for not fully obeying this command. David would fight the Amalekites. And finally, in the time of Esther, an Amalekite named Haman would try to exterminate all the Jews. But he would fail, because what God declares happens. Amalek was eventually erased from history. And now, after trials, provisions, battles, victories, Israel was ready for the most important moment in human history until Christ. The encounter at Sinai, the giving of the law, the moment when God would descend visibly, when the mountain would burn, when the covenant would be sealed, when Israel would cease to be merely a liberated people and become a holy nation, and Moses would ascend into the presence of God, into a place where man does not survive, and he would return transformed, with tablets written by the finger of God, with a law that would shape civilization for millennia. Sinai was waiting, and with it, glory and terror, promise and demand, covenant and responsibility. Exodus 19 verses 1 and 2. In the 3rd month after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. So Israel camped there before the mountain. 3 months since they left Egypt, 3 months of journeying, and now, finally, they arrived at the mountain. Sinai, the mountain of God. The same mountain where Moses saw the burning bush, and now the entire people were there, at the foot of the mountain. And Moses went up. Verse 3, and Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, and God gave a message for all Israel. Verses 4 through 6. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. If you obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my special treasure above all people, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Look at what I did for you. I carried you. I brought you to myself. And now, covenant. If you obey, you will be my treasure. A kingdom of priests, a holy nation. This was not slavery. It was an invitation. Do you want to be mine? Then live like mine. Obey my voice. Keep my covenant. Moses went down, told the people, and the response was unanimous. Verse 8. Then all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. All we will do, a solemn promise. Total commitment. They did not yet know what God would require, but they were already committed, because they had seen what he had done, and they trusted. But before the law, there had to be preparation. Verses 10 through 11. Then the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and let them be ready for the 3rd day. For on the 3rd day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Consecration, purification, preparation. Because you do not enter the presence of God casually. This is not a common event. It is an encounter with absolute holiness. You must be ready, clean, focused. And there were boundaries. Verses 12 through 13. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, Take heed to yourselves that you do not go up to the mountain or touch its base. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. Not a hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot with an arrow. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. Do not touch the mountain, under penalty of death, because when God descends, the place becomes holy. So holy that unauthorized proximity is fatal. Imagine the terror. Imagine the seriousness. God was not a mascot, not a casual friend. He was God, holy, powerful, dangerous. And on the third day, it happened. Verses 16 through 19. Then it came to pass on the third day in the morning, that there were thunderings and lightnings, and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the trumpet was very loud, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. And when the blast of the trumpet sounded long and became louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him by voice, thunder, lightning, thick cloud, the sound of a trumpet growing louder, the mountain smoking, the earth shaking, visible fire, audible voice. This was not metaphor. It was physical manifestation. God was there, tangible, real, terrifying. And the people at the foot of the mountain trembled with fear, with reverence, with the absolute awareness we are standing before the Creator of the universe. Verse 20. Then the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai, on the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Moses went up alone, into the fire, into the cloud, into a presence that would have killed anyone else. But God called him. And when God calls, he protects. And there, at the top of the mountain, in the midst of fire and thunder, God spoke, and his words changed the world. Exodus 20, verses 1 through 17. The 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Identification. Credential. I am the one who set you free. That is why I have authority to speak. That is why you must listen. You shall have no other gods before me. First commandment. Exclusivity. Absolute loyalty. Because God does not share glory, he does not compete with idols. Either he is God or he is not. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. Second commandment. Do not try to capture God in a form. Do not reduce the infinite to an idol. Do not worship creation. Worship the Creator. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Third commandment. The name of God is sacred. Do not use it lightly. Do not profane it. Do not swear falsely, because a name carries authority, and the authority of God is not a joke. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Fourth commandment. Rest. 1 day in 7, to stop, to worship, to remember that you are human, not a machine. That productivity does not define your worth. That God provides even when you do not work. Honor your father and your mother. Fifth commandment. Family. Respect, gratitude. Because a healthy society begins at home. Because parents deserve honor. Because family structure is the foundation of civilization. You shall not murder. Sixth commandment. Life is sacred, created in the image of God. You do not have the right to take it arbitrarily. You shall not commit adultery. Seventh commandment. Marriage is sacred. Covenant is serious. Betrayal destroys. Faithfulness protects. You shall not steal. Eighth commandment. Property is real. Work has value. You do not take what others have earned. You shall not bear false witness. Ninth commandment. Truth matters. Lies destroy. Reputation is precious. Justice depends on honesty. You shall not covet. 10th commandment. Contentment, a satisfied heart, because coveting is the root of all kinds of evil. It is desire that leads to action. It is thought that becomes sin. 10 commandments. Simple, direct, universal, and to this day, the foundation of Western law and morality. But that was only the beginning. God kept speaking about civil laws, ceremonial laws, sacrifices, feasts, social justice, loans, servants, about everything. Exodus chapters 20 through 23. Law after law, regulation after regulation. Building a just society, an advanced legal system, protections for the poor, widows, orphans, and foreigners. And then God made a request. Exodus 25, verse 8. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. Make me a sanctuary, a tabernacle, a tent, so that I may dwell among you, so that my presence is not only on a distant mountain, but in the center of the camp. And God gave detailed instructions, meticulous, about materials, measurements, colors, structure, furniture, priestly, garments, ritual, everything. Because when God dwells somewhere, the place must reflect His holiness. It must be perfect. It must be exact. Not out of caprice, but because every detail pointed to spiritual truth. Every piece was a symbol. Every ritual was a lesson. And Moses was on the mountain, receiving it all for 40 days and 40 nights. Exodus 24, verse 18. So Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, 40 days without eating, without drinking, in the presence of God, speaking face to face, receiving law, seeing glory, being transformed. And at the end, God gave something extraordinary. Exodus 31, verse 18. And when he had made an end of speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. Written with the finger of God. Not dictated for Moses to write. Written by God Himself. Divine lettering in stone, the 10 Commandments, engraved for eternity. Moses was holding in his hands the very handwriting of God. It was an immeasurable treasure, the foundation of the covenant. It was, and then God said something that shattered Moses. Exodus 30, verses 7 through 8. And the Lord said to Moses, Go, get down, for your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded calf, and worshipped it, and sacrificed to it. Your people, notice, not my people, yours, because God was angry. They had corrupted themselves. They made an idol, a golden calf, and they were worshipping it. Right now, while Moses was here with me, while I was giving the law, they were breaking the law. And Moses did not yet know how bad it was, but he was about to find out in a devastating way. While Moses was on the mountain, at the foot of the mountain, chaos reigned. 40 days without seeing Moses. The people grew nervous, impatient, and afraid. Exodus chapter 32, verse 1. When the people saw Moses delayed, they gathered to Aaron, saying, Make us gods to go before us. As for this Moses, who brought us from Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. Make us gods, plural. One invisible God was not enough. They wanted something tangible, something they could see, something like in Egypt, where gods had formed, where you could point and say, There it is. Aaron, who should have resisted, gave in. Verses 2 through 4. Break off the golden earrings from your wives, sons, and daughters, and bring them to me. People broke off golden earrings, brought them to Aaron. He fashioned it with a tool, making a molded calf, a young bull, symbol of strength, fertility, power. Common in pagan religions like Apis in Egypt, Baal in Canaan. Now, Israel had its own calf, made from gold god, provided from the Egyptians. Cruel irony. gold meant for the tabernacle became an idol, wealth of liberation, a tool of rebellion. And the people, seeing the calf, said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." Blasphemy, attributing to an idol what God did, crediting to a dead object the salvation that came from the I Am. And worse, verses 5 and 6, when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." Then they rose early on the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play, a feast to the Lord. Aaron attempted syncretism, mixing the worship of Yahweh with idolatry, using the calf as a representation of God. As if God needed a representation, as if you could worship the invisible through the visible that you created yourself. And the people ate, drank, and played. The Hebrew word implies sexual immorality, an orgy. Because when you remove God from the equation, when you worship creation instead of the Creator, morality disappears. Everything is permitted. And on the mountain, God said to Moses, verses 9 and 10, "And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and indeed it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore, let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, and I will make of you a great nation. Let me alone." As if Moses were holding God back, as if a man's intercession could influence a divine decision. But it could, because God voluntarily limits himself, because he chooses to work through intercessors, because prayer changes things, and God was offering a new chance to Moses. "I will destroy Israel, and I will start over with you. You will be a new Abraham." It was a tempting offer. Moses could eliminate all his problems, all the rebellious people. Murmuring, ungrateful, gone, and start from zero. But Moses did something extraordinary. He interceded, verses 11 through 13. Then Moses pleaded with the Lord his God and said, "Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak and say, 'He brought them out to harm them, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth'? Turn from your fierce wrath and relent from this harm to your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self." Notice the arguments. First, your people, not mine, yours. You brought them out. You made a promise. Second, your reputation. What will the Egyptians say? That your power only worked in Egypt, but not in the desert. Third, your promise. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You swore by yourself. Multiplication, land, blessing. You cannot go back on it. And it worked. Verse 14. So the Lord relented from the harm which he said he would do to his people. He relented. Not that God changed his essence, but that he responded to intercession, that the effective prayer of a righteous man can do much, that an intercessor can stand between God and the people, between wrath and mercy, and plead and prevail. But now Moses needed to go down and face what was happening. Verses 15 and 16, "And Moses turned and went down from the mountain, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in his hand. The tablets were written on both sides. On the one side and on the other they were written. Now the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets." The work of God, the writing of God, in Moses' hands, going down. And he still did not know how bad it was. Joshua, who was waiting further down, heard a noise. Verses 17 and 18. "And when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, 'There is a noise of war in the camp.' But he said, 'It is not the noise of the shout of victory, nor the noise of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing I hear. It is not war. It is a celebration, but the wrong celebration. A celebration around an idol.'" a celebration that breaks everything God just established. And when Moses got close, verse 19, so it was, as soon as he came near the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing. So Moses' anger became hot, and he cast the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. He broke the tablets written by God, divine work. Broken, not by accident, out of righteous fury, because a symbolically broken law represented a law already broken in practice. Israel violated the covenant before even officially receiving it. Verse 20, then he took the calf which they had made, burned it in the fire, and ground it to powder. And he scattered it on the water, and made the children of Israel drink it. Complete destruction of the idol. Burned, ground, scattered in the water, and forced down their throats, the bitter taste of literal idolatry. And Moses confronted Aaron. Verse 21, and Moses said to Aaron, what did this people do to you, that you have brought so great a sin upon them? What did they do to you? How could you? Who saw everything I saw? Who was with me before Pharaoh? Who saw the plagues? Who crossed the sea? How could you allow this? And Aaron's response was pathetic. Verses 22 through 24. So Aaron said, do not let the anger of my Lord become hot. You know the people, that they are set on evil. For they said to me, make us gods that shall go before us. As for this Moses, we do not know what has become of him. And I said to them, whoever has any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me, and I cast it into the fire, and this calf came out. And this calf came out, as if it were an accident, as if he threw gold into the fire, and, surprise, a perfectly formed calf appeared. Zero responsibility, total denial, weak leadership, weak character. And the consequences were severe. Verses 25 through 28, Moses summoned the Levites, and they, with swords, went through the camp killing. 3,000 men died that day. 3,000 who led the rebellion, 3,000 who refused to repent. It was brutal. It was necessary, because untreated sign spreads. Like cancer, it needs to be cut out before it kills the whole body. And the next day, Moses went up again to the Lord to intercede. One last time with everything. Verses 31 and 32. Then Moses returned to the Lord and said, oh, these people have committed a great sin, and have made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray, blot me out of your book, which you have written. Blot me out. If you do not forgive them, cross my name out too. I do not want a salvation they do not have. I prefer condemnation with them over glory without them. It was the love of a shepherd, the sacrifice of a leader, a willingness to die for the people, pointing to Christ, who centuries later would do exactly that. He would be blotted out so that we would not be. And God answered. Verse 33, and the Lord said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. Individual responsibility. Each one answers for their own sin. Your intercession saved the nation, but it does not eliminate personal consequence. And God sent a plague. Verse 35, so the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made, the golden calf, the sin that almost destroyed Israel, the mistake that cost 3,000 lives, the rebellion that broke tablets written by God, but also the test that revealed Moses' character. Intercessor, shepherd, a leader willing to die for his people, a man who chose a rebellious people over an offer of a new nation. And this would be just the first of many intercessions, because Israel would keep sinning, keep rebelling, keep testing God's patience. And Moses, time and time again, would stand between divine wrath and human rebellion, pleading, begging, interceding, saving, until the day his own frustration would lead him to sin and cost him his entry into the promised land. But that was still far away. For now, there was work. A tabernacle to build, new tablets to receive, the presence of God to restore in the middle of the camp, and a brutal lesson learned. Never, ever underestimate how fast a people can fall, how fragile human faithfulness is, how necessary constant vigilance is. After the golden calf, there was a problem, a serious problem. God had promised to dwell in the midst of Israel. But how does a holy God dwell among a people who have just proven themselves rebellious? How can divine presence coexist with human sinfulness? The answer: the tabernacle and atonement. Moses went up the mountain again to receive new tablets. The first ones he broke. These he cut himself. Exodus 34, verse 1. And the Lord said to Moses, "Cut the tablets of stone like the first ones, and I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke." God would rewrite them, the same words, because the covenant had not changed. The law had not changed, only the tablets, because God is patient. He gives second chances. He begins again. And Moses spent 40 days on the mountain. Again, and this time, something extraordinary happened. Verse 29, Now it was so, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. His face shone, literally radiated light, because he had been in the presence of God. Because divine glory is so intense that it leaves a physical mark, that it transforms even flesh. And the people, seeing it, were afraid. Verse 30, So when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. So Moses wore a veil, covered his face, except when he spoke with God or delivered his word. Because the glory was too much. It frightened them, it dazzled them. Paul, centuries later, would use this as an illustration. Moses covered his face because the glory was fading. Temporary, but Christ brought permanent glory. Glory that does not fade. That does not need to be covered. But there, in the desert, the glory on Moses' face was a constant reminder. This man speaks with God. This man stands between two worlds, human yet touched by the divine. And now, construction. Exodus, chapters 35 through 40, 5 chapters of detail about how Israel built the tabernacle. The people brought offerings: gold, silver, bronze, linen, skins, wood, spices, oil, precious stones, so much that Moses had to say, "Stop bringing more. It is enough." The same hands that gave gold for the calf now gave for the tabernacle. The same heart that strayed now turned back. Because genuine repentance produces genuine generosity, and craftsmen worked, Bezalel and Oholiab, filled with the Spirit of God, with divine wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, to create according to the pattern God had shown, because everything had to be exact. Every measurement, every color, every detail, not out of whim, but because every piece pointed to Christ. It was a shadow of heavenly reality. It was prophecy in wood, metal, and fabric, the Ark of the Covenant. A wooden chest overlaid with gold, containing the tablets of the law. Manna, Aaron's rod, a lid called the mercy seat, two cherubim with wings overshadowing it. The place where blood would be sprinkled, the place where God would meet man. It pointed to Christ. Propitiation, the place of atonement, where the wrath of God is satisfied, where justice and mercy meet. The lampstand, the menorah 7 branches, pure gold. Constant light, pointing to Christ. The light of the world, shining in the darkness. The table of showbread 12 loaves, always fresh, pointing to Christ. The bread of life, spiritual sustenance, the altar of incense, fragrance rising, constant prayer, pointing to Christ, eternal intercessor. The bronze altar, where animals were sacrificed, where blood was poured out, pointing to Christ. The slain lamb, the final sacrifice, the bronze laver, for priestly washing, pointing to Christ, who cleanses us, who sanctifies us, and the veil separating the most holy place from the rest, thick, impossible to cross, pointing to the barrier between a holy God and sinful humanity, a barrier Christ would tear at the cross. Everything was built exactly as God commanded, and when it was finished, Exodus 40, verse 33. So Moses finished the work. Finished, it was complete. And then, the most extraordinary moment, verses 34 through 35, Then the cloud covered the tabernacle of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting, because the cloud rested above it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. The glory filled it, so intense that even Moses could not enter. The presence of God, which had been on the mountain, now dwelled in the middle of the camp. God coming near, God living among his people. And from then on, verses 36 through 38, whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would go onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not journey till the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was above the tabernacle by day, and fire was over it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel. Throughout all their journeys, cloud by the eye, fire by night, always visible, always present, guiding every movement. Cloud lifts, march, cloud stays, camp. Simple as that. God had not only delivered them, God dwelled with them. God personally guided them, step by step, journey by journey. And so began the true pilgrimage, from Sinai to the Promised Land, with God in their midst, with law established, with sacrifices instituted, with priesthood functioning. Israel was no longer merely a liberated people. It was a theocratic nation, a kingdom of priests, a holy people, with God as visible king, with his literal presence at the center. It was incredible. It was unprecedented. It was, and it should have been, a short journey. 11 days from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, the border of the Promised Land. 11 days to enter the blessing. 11 days to their inheritance. 11 days to the end of wandering. But it would not be 11 days. It would be 40 years. Because of unbelief, because of fear, because of rebellion that was about to happen. A rebellion that would define the destiny of an entire generation. A failure that would condemn every adult to die in the wilderness. A moment of cowardice that would cost them the Promised Land. And it would all begin with 12 men, 12 spies, sent to explore Canaan, and returning with a divided report. Numbers chapter 13. Israel was encamped at Kadesh Barnea. On the border, the Promised Land just a few days' march away, 400 years of waiting about to end, Abraham's promise about to be fulfilled. And God said, "Send spies, send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them, 12 men, one from each tribe, leaders, princes, the best, to explore the land, see what awaited them, bring back a report." It was not a test of whether they could conquer it. God had already promised, "I will give it." The land was guaranteed. It was just reconnaissance. Understand the terrain, see the cities, evaluate the people, prepare a strategy, but not to question the victory. The victory was certain. Moses instructed them, "See the land, see the people. Are they strong or weak? Many or few. See the cities, fortified or not. See the soil, fertile or not, and bring back some of the fruit." And they went for 40 days. They explored from north to south. They saw cities, peoples, giants, and wealth. In the valley of Eshcol, they cut down a cluster of grapes so large it took 2 men to carry it. A cluster that needed 2 men. Imagine the fertility, the abundance. The land truly flowed with milk and honey. It was everything God promised, and more. And they returned. They presented the report to Moses, Aaron, and the congregation in the wilderness of Paran. They showed them the fruit and said, "We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. It flows with milk and honey." Confirmed. The land is good. It is rich. It is everything we hoped for. But Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong, the cities are fortified, and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea. But the people are strong, the cities are fortified, and there are giants. Anakim, Nephilim, huge men, terrible warriors. 10 of the 12 spies saw the obstacles and concluded impossible. But 2 disagreed. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." Caleb, a man of faith, a man of courage. "Let us go up at once. We can. Let's go. Now." Because God promised. And if God promised, the size of the giants does not matter. The height of the walls does not matter. We will win. But the 10 contradicted him. "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants. The descendants of Anak came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. We cannot. They are stronger. They are giants. We were like grasshoppers in our own eyes and in their eyes." An infamous report, contagious, because fear spreads faster than faith. Doubt is more viral than trust, and the people's reaction was immediate. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness." They wept, they murmured, they wished for death. Better to die in Egypt, better to die in the desert, than to face giants. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, "Let us select a leader and return to Egypt." Return to Egypt, where they were slaves, where their children were killed, where they suffered for generations. But at least it was familiar. At least it was known. Better a known slavery than an uncertain freedom. And they were about to elect a new leader. Abandon Moses. Go back. Give up. Throw away everything God had done. And Joshua and Caleb, desperate, tore their clothes. But Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, "The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Do not be afraid. God is wheat. Us the enemies have no protection. We do. The victory is guaranteed. Just believe." But the people's response was brutal, and all the congregation said to stone them with stones. "Stone them! Kill the men of faith! Silence the voice of confidence! Because truth that confronts cowardice is unbearable." And at that moment, God intervened. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting before all the children of Israel. And God was angry. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will this people provoke me? And how long will they not believe me? Despite all the signs which I have performed among them, I will strike them with pestilence and disinherit them. And I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. I will destroy them all and start over with you." Again, the same offer as with the golden calf. But Moses' response would be the same. He interceded, a long plea, appealing to God's reputation, to ancient promises, to mercy, to the glory of the divine name. And God forgave, but not without consequences. because all these men who have seen my glory in the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. All the adults, all who saw the plagues, who crossed the sea, who received manna, who saw the glory, and still did not believe, they will not enter. They will die in the wilderness. Say to them, As I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in this wilderness. All of you who were numbered, according to your entire number, from 20 years old and above. You said you wanted to die in the wilderness. You will die. You said you did not want to enter the land. You will not enter. Your words became prophecy. Your unbelief became a sentence. And your sons shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and bear the brunt of your unfaithfulness until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years. And you shall know my rejection. 40 days of spying, 40 years of punishment, 1 year for each day, an entire generation lost. Children who were supposed to be victims of giants would now inherit the land. Adults who were afraid would now die. And the 10 spies who brought the evil report, those very men who brought the bad report about the land, died by the plague before the Lord, because their words cost an entire generation, because their fear condemned millions. Only Joshua and Caleb, among the adults, would enter, because only they believed. Only they had courage. Only they trusted in God's promise above the size of the giants. And when the people heard the sentence, they repented too late. Then Moses told these words to all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. And they rose early in the morning and went up to the top of the mountain, saying, Here we are, and we will go up to the place which the Lord has promised, for we have sinned. Now you want to go? Now you have courage. No. It is not courage. It is presumption. It is trying to force a blessing after rejecting God's timing. Now, why do you transgress the command of the Lord? For this will not succeed. Do not go up, lest you be defeated by your enemies, for the Lord is not among you. Without God, you lose. Without the divine presence, giants win. Do not be foolish. But they presumed to go up to the mountaintop. Nevertheless, neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses departed from the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in that mountain came down and attacked them, and drove them back as far as Hormah, massacred completely. Because they tried without God, because presumption without presence is suicide. And so began 40 years. 40 years of wandering in circles in the wilderness. 40 years waiting for the adults to die. 40 years in which an entire generation disappeared. One by one, until only the children from Kadesh remained. 40 years that did not need to happen. 40 years because of 11 days of unbelief. 40 years because giants seemed bigger than God. And Moses, who had delivered Israel from Egypt, was now shepherding a dying people on the move. A condemned generation, waiting for the end. But he remained faithful. He kept leading. He kept interceding, because a servant of God does not give up on the people of God, even when the people give up on themselves. And in the midst of those 40 years, there would be more rebellions, more trials, more tests, but also more revelations of God's character, more manifestations of glory, more preparation for the next generation. Because although the present generation was lost, the future generation still had hope. And God does not abandon his plans. He simply adjusts the timing, and he even uses human disobedience to fulfill divine purpose. The years passed slowly, like sand slipping through a giant hourglass in the desert. Day after day, year after year, generation after generation. Numbers 33 records, 42 stops. 42 times they camped. 42 times they took down their tents. 42 times the cloud guided them. Circles in the wilderness. Waiting, always waiting for death. Because that was the brutal reality. Every funeral was a marker. Every grave in the desert was a reminder. It is not time yet. Not enough have died yet. And during those years, there would be rebellions, tests, trials that would reveal who truly trusted God. Numbers chapter 16. Korah Levite, from the same tribe as Moses and Aaron, but dissatisfied, ambitious, and he decided to challenge the leadership. Verses 1 through 3. Now Korah the son of Izhar, with Dathan and Abiram, and On, took 250 men of the children of Israel, leaders of the congregation, representatives of the assembly, men of renown, and they gathered together against Moses and Aaron, and said to them, You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? The whole congregation is holy. Why do you exalt yourselves? Why can only you lead? Why can only Aaron be high priest? It was a question of authority. Spiritual democracy. Everyone is equal, so everyone can lead. Human logic, but not divine logic, because God chooses. God appoints. And to question the one chosen by God is to question the God who chooses. Moses fell on his face. Verse 4. Not in fear, in intercession, in appeal to God. You settle this. And he said to Korah, verse 7, Tomorrow the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. Bring censers. Put fire in them, put incense in them, and see whom God accepts. At the same time, he confronted their greed. Verses 9 through 10. Is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord, and that he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi, with you? And are you seeking the priesthood also? Is it not enough to be a Levite? To have the privilege of serving in the tabernacle, you want more. You want a priesthood that is not yours? And the next day, the assembly, 250 men with censers, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram leading, and Moses warned the people. Verse 26. Depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins. Step away, because judgment is coming, and whoever stands near will be consumed. Then Moses declared, verses 28 through 30, By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. If these men die naturally like all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. A test. If they die naturally, I am an impostor. But if God creates something new, if the earth swallows them, you will know God chose me. And it happened. Verses 31 through 33. Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. The earth opened, literal, physical, and swallowed them, entire families, tents, belongings, everything, and it closed over them. Burith, alive, screaming as they went down. Immediate judgment. Supernatural, undeniable. And the people fled. Verse 34. Then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they sighed, lest the earth swallow us up also. But it was not over. Verse 35. And a fire came out from the Lord, and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. Fire from heaven, consuming those who offered unauthorized incense, because to approach God without being called is death, because holiness is not a game. And the censers, verses 38 through 40, hammered flat, made into a covering for the altar, a permanent reminder. Do not rebel against the one chosen by God. Do not question divine authority, or the earth will swallow you, or fire will consume you. Yet the next day, the people complained again. Verse 41. On the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord." Incredible. God judges, and they blame Moses, as if Moses controlled the earth and fire, as if it were a human decision, not a divine one. And the plague began. Verses 46 through 48. Moses said to Aaron, "Take a censer, and put fire in it from the altar. Put incense on it, and take it quickly to the congregation, and make atonement for them. For wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun." Then Aaron took it as Moses commanded, and ran into the midst of the assembly. And already the plague had begun among the people. So he put in the incense, and made atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living. So the plague was stopped. A powerful image, a priest between death and life, intercession that saves, pointing to Christ, who stood between condemned humanity and a holy God. And through his sacrifice, the plague of sin was stopped. But the cost was high. Verse 49. Now those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the Korah incident. 14,700. In one day, because murmuring is not innocent. Rebellion is not without consequence, and God's patience has limits. Years later, another crisis. Numbers, chapter 20. In the wilderness of Zin, no water. Again, verses 2 through 5. The congregation gathered against Moses and Aaron. "If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we and our animals should die here?" The psalmist sung the same complaining. 40 years, and they had not learned, not grown, not changed. And Moses and Aaron fell on their faces. Verse 6. And the glory of the Lord appeared. And God instructed, verses 7 through 8. "Take the rod. You and your brother Aaron gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Speak to the rock. Just speak, and water will come out." Simple, clear, but Moses was angry. 40 years leading an ungrateful people. 40 years of complaining. 40 years of rebellion. And now, again, no water, again, complaining. And his frustration exploded. Verse 10. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. And he said to them, "Hear now, you rebels. Must we bring water for you out of this rock? Hear now, you rebels." A tone of anger, of contempt, and worse, must we bring? As if he and Aaron were the source, as if they had the power, as if it were not God. Verse 11. Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly. And the congregation and their animals drank. He struck it twice. When he was supposed to speak, disobedience. Small, but significant. Because it was not about water. It was about representing God correctly. And Moses, in anger, distorted the divine character. And God spoke. Verse 12. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe me, to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. You will not enter." After 40 years, after delivering the people, after interceding again and again, after everything, one moment of frustration, and it cost the promised land. Does it seem unfair? Does it seem harsh? But it was not about Moses. It was about God. And leaders represent God. And when leaders fail to represent Him rightly, consequences are severe. And shortly after, Numbers chapter 20, verses 22 through 29, Aaron died on Mount Hor, transferring the priestly garments to Eleazar. His son and the whole congregation mourned 30 days. Moses lost his brother. his spokesman, his companion on the journey. And he knew that soon he too would depart. But there was still work to do. There were still battles. Numbers chapter 21. Fiery serpents. A plague of venomous bites, because the people complained again. Verses 6 through 7. So the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people. And many of the people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you." Finally, recognition of sin, hinuin, and God provided healing. Verses 8 through 9. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Make a fiery serpent, and set it on a pole, and it shall be that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live." So Moses made a bronze serpent, and put it on a pole, and so it was if a serpent had bitten anyone. When he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. A bronze serpent lifted up, and whoever looked lived. It made no sense. How does looking at a serpent heal a serpent's bite? But it was not about logic. It was about obedience, about fate. And Jesus, centuries later, would use this in the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verses 14 through 15. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Christ lifted up on the cross, and whoever looks lives. The same faith, the same principle. Salvation not by understanding, but by trusting. And finally, after years of wandering in circles, the time came. The old generation had died. The new one was ready, and the victories began. Victory over Og, king of Bashan. Land conquered, enemies defeated. Momentum shifting. Numbers chapter 21, verses 21 through 35. Victory over Sihon, king of the Amorites. Victory over Og, king of Bashan. Land conquered, enemies defeated. Momentum shifting. And they arrived at Moab, the plains east of the Jordan, the border of the promised land, where Israel would camp, where Moses would give his final speeches, where the journey would finally meet its end. 40 years. An entire generation. The people who left Egypt were dead, except Joshua, Caleb, and Moses. And Moses knew his time was also coming to an end. But before departing, he had final words, instructions, warnings, blessings, all recorded in the book of Deuteronomy, the second giving of the law. A recap of everything God had done, everything God required, everything Israel needed to remember. And those words would shape not only Israel, but every civilization that would come after, because Moses was not merely a leader for a moment. He was a voice for eternity. Deuteronomy. These are the words. That is how it begins. The last book of Moses. His final testament, 40 years of journey, distilled into farewell speeches. And Moses, now 120 years old, spoke chapter after chapter, remembering, warning, exhorting. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. The Shema. Hear, the central prayer of Judaism, the foundational declaration, one God, total love, complete devotion. Jesus would quote it as the greatest commandment, because everything begins here. Exclusive love for the one true God. Deuteronomy 8, verse 3. So he humbled you, allowed you to hunger, and fed you with manna which you did not know, that he might make you know that man shall not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word which proceeds from the mouth of the Lord. Jesus would quote this when tempted in the wilderness, because Moses understood a fundamental truth. The physical is not everything. The spiritual is primary, and the Word of God sustains more than food. Deuteronomy 30, verses 19 through 20. I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, that you may obey his voice, and that you may cling to him. For he is your life and the length of your days. Choice: life or death, blessing or curse, obedience or rebellion. There is no neutrality, no middle ground. Choose. And Moses spoke about the promised land, a land he would not enter, but they would. He described it, warned about temptations, about forgetting, about the pride that comes with prosperity. Chapter 28. Blessings of obedience, curses of rebellion. Detailed, specific, prophetic. Because God knows the future, and Moses was speaking not only to the present generation, but to all who would come. Then the time came, Deuteronomy 31, verses 1 through 2. Then Moses went and spoke these words to all Israel. And he said to them, I am 120 years old today. I can no longer go out and come in. Also the Lord has said to me, you shall not cross over this Jordan. 120 years. And God had said, this is as far as you go. No further. You will see it, but you will not enter. And Moses did not complain, did not argue. He accepted it because an obedient servant accepts divine limits without bitterness. Verses 7 through 8. Then Moses called Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of good courage, for you must go with this people to the land which the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you shall cause them to inherit it. And the Lord, he is the one who goes before you. He will be with you, he will not leave you, nor forsake you. Do not fear, nor be dismayed. The transfer of leadership. Moses to Joshua, deliverer to conqueror. And the message, God goes with you. Do not fear. And Moses wrote a song, Deuteronomy 32, prophetic, poetic, covering Israel's history, past, present, future, God's faithfulness, Israel's unfaithfulness, judgment, restoration. Then final blessings. Chapter 33, for each tribe, prophetic words. Destiny declared, future, sile, and finally, the last ascent. Deuteronomy 34, verses 1 through 4. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the south, and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Soar. Then the Lord said to him, this is the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have caused you to see it with your eyes. But you shall not cross over Bel Mount Nebo, a complete panorama from north to south, from east to west, all the promised land, visible, tangible. So close, but he would not cross. God showed it but did not grant access. Because consequences are real, even for faithful servants. Verses 5 through 6. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. But no one knows his grave to this day. Eviettere, servant of the Lord, an honorable title, not king, not merely prophet. Servant, the greatest title possible. And God buried him, personally, and no one knows where, because God did not want a tomb becoming a place of pilgrimage, of idolatry. Moses pointed to God, not to himself. Verse 7, Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. 120. Still strong, still clear-minded. He did not die of old age. He died because it was time, because God said so. Verse 8. And the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses ended. Then the conclusion. Verses 10 through 12. But since then there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, in all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, before Pharaoh, before all his servants, and in all his land, and by all that mighty power and all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. Never again did a prophet arise like Moses, face to face with God. Unmatched signs, unprecedented wonders. Until Christ. Because Deuteronomy 18, verse 15 prophesied, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst. From your brethren him you shall hear, a prophet like Moses." Greater than Moses, the true deliverer, not from physical slavery, but spiritual bondage, not from Egypt, but from sin, not through the Red Sea, but through the cross. And the legacy of Moses, incalculable. He wrote the Pentateuch, 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The foundation of all Scripture, the basis of Jewish and Christian faith. He received the law, 10 commandments, 613 commandments in total, a legal system that shaped Western civilization, concepts of justice, human rights, dignity, equality before the law. It all began at Sinai. He established the priesthood, the system of sacrifices, the tabernacle, all pointing to Christ. The entire Levitical system was shadow. Christ is substance. He delivered a nation from slavery to freedom, from oppression to covenant with God. Israel exists because of Moses. And through Israel, Christ came. And through Christ, salvation came to the world. Interceded, again and again, standing between God and the people, between wrath and mercy, saving a generation that deserved destruction. A model of Christ who stands between who intercedes, who saves. He was a reluctant leader who grew in confidence, a shepherd of sheep who became a shepherd of a people, a stutterer who spoke to Pharaoh, a fugitive murderer who became a deliverer. Proof that God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He was a man of failures. He killed an Egyptian. He struck the rock. He had moments of doubt, of frustration, of disobedience. But he was a faithful servant, and God used him powerfully. And to this day, Moses is remembered by Jews, by Christians, by Muslims, as a prophet, as a lawgiver, as a man of God. Jesus spoke with him on the Mount of Transfiguration. Moses appeared, along with Elijah, speaking with Christ about the Exodus Christ would accomplish in Jerusalem, the final Exodus. From death to life, from sin to salvation, and in eternity, he will be remembered. Revelation 15 verse 3 speaks of the song of Moses and of the Lamb. Moses and Jesus, side by side, deliverer and savior, shadow and substance. Moses lived 120 years, 40 in Egypt, 40 in Midian, 40 in the wilderness. 3 phases, each one preparing him for the next. The first 40, learning who he was not, a prince who discovered he was a slave. The second 40, learning humility, breaking pride, becoming nothing. The third 40, being used by God, a humble servant doing the impossible. And his story teaches us, it is never too late for God to use you. Moses began at 80, it is never too early for God to prepare you. Joseph suffered from 17 to 30. David waited from 15 to 30. Preparation takes time, but it is worth it. And his story teaches us, costly obedience is better than comfortable disobedience. Moses chose to suffer with the people of God rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin. And he changed history. And his story teaches us, God uses the weak, a stutterer to confront Pharaoh, a murderer to free slaves, a reluctant man to lead a nation, because when the weak are used powerfully, the glory goes to God. And his story teaches us, consequences are real, even for faithful servants. Moses did not enter because of a moment of disobedience. And that is not injustice, it is seriousness. Leaders are held to a higher standard, but his story also teaches us God is faithful always. Israel rebelled repeatedly, but God did not abandon them. Moses interceded repeatedly, and God listened. Because God keeps covenant even when we do not. And so the story of Moses ends. Deliverer of Israel, lawgiver of God, prophet, face to face, faithful servant, a man of failures. Yet a man used powerfully. He did not enter the promised land, but he entered something greater, the presence of God, eternity. And there he waits for the resurrection, for the new heaven and new earth, where he will finally enter the true promised land. Not Canaan, but the eternal kingdom. And until then, his story keeps speaking. Through the pages of Scripture, through transformed lives. Through every person who hears the call, who leaves comfort for obedience, who chooses God over the world. Because Moses did not live for himself. He lived for God and for the people of God. And that life was not wasted. It was invested, and it continues to yield returns through millennia into eternity. And when you hear the call, when God asks something impossible, when the bush burns, when the sea must open, remember Moses. Remember that God does not need ability. He needs availability. He does not need strength. He needs faith. He does not need giants. He needs people who trust the God who defeats giants. And then, like Moses, say, "Here I am, send me." And watch what God will do through you, for his glory, for the good of his people, for the advancement of his kingdom. Because the story of Moses is not just history. It is an invitation. It is a challenge. It is a promise. If God could use Moses, a stutterer, a murderer, a reluctant man, he can use anyone, even you and me. If you enjoyed this video about the story of Moses, leave your amen in the comments, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any biblical stories we post here. Click now on the suggested video appearing on your screen. Watch the next story we've prepared with great care for you. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. See you in the next video. God bless you.